WWT presents Meet the Chief.
Welcome to another episode of Meet the Chief. I am Tracy Byrne. I'm the head of global cyber strategy and go-to-market here at WWT. We are so excited to host our guest, Khalid Raza from Graphiant. If you guys are not familiar with this technology, it's incredibly cool and game-changing. They are an agile and secure network connectivity company, and they're really doing what cloud has done to compute to the landscape of networking. So welcome, Khalid. Great to have you here.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Oh, fantastic. So not only are you one of the founders and CEO of Graphiant, but you're also known as the father of SD-WAN. Can you talk to us a little bit about the history there and your story?
So the idea of SD-WAN, let me take a step back. I started with Cisco in '93, so I worked with large service providers and very large enterprise customers. So I went inside of Cisco around 2009 timeframe and pitched the idea of SD-WAN. To my good luck, nobody listened. I must have pitched it for the next 2 years saying, look, there is a problem that most enterprises are facing, and that is their bandwidth requirements of the branch is growing at a much faster speed versus what service providers are able to offer them over private infrastructure. And the cost of commodity internet is much cheaper. So they're looking to offset that bandwidth growth with getting a commodity internet into their branches along with the private VPNs. Mm-hmm. But service providers are not paying attention to it. They want that freedom to be able to run the network that they want to run. I pitched it for 2 years. Nobody listened. I decided finally in 2012, left and started Viptela. In fact, Viptela's story is also interesting. I must have talked to at least 20 venture capitalists, and everybody said that they don't see any value in the idea until I reached Sequoia Capital. And Sequoia Capital guys looked at it and says, this is a brilliant idea. And once we got funded, everybody who said no to us funded us some other SD-WAN company. And SD-WAN was a $0 market in 2012. Today, by some estimates, it's an $8 billion market. Which we created in 12 years.
Well, the incredible thing, too, is like when you think of that market that you essentially created, think about all of the technology offsprings of that market. I mean, I know that, we haven't talked about it too much here because it is peripheral, but it's even, if you think about SASE and SSE, like that is all spurred from what you've created.
Yes, these are offshoots of SD-WAN. Absolutely.
Yeah, so very, very interesting stuff. So I'm sure you have some interesting stories from the trenches as you were really developing this concept in the background. Can you talk to us, in your work with some of the biggest service providers as well as global banks, what are some stories from the trenches?
So you can tell from my gray hair, I'm not that young. So I started working with internet since 1993, 2 years after its commercialization. Mm-hmm. And I've seen the growth from 20,000 connections on the internet, routing tables, to now in millions. So along the way, you've learned so many things. I'll tell you two interesting stories. One is I was working with a very big service provider. And that's what actually gave success to my career inside of Cisco. I was 2 years into Cisco, and a very, very large tier one service provider had an outage. Mm-hmm. And when you are a young guy, nobody pays that much attention to your opinion. And I looked at that problem and I said, I think this is the problem. Some of the senior guys working on the call said, no, we don't think so. And within 2 hours, they came to the same conclusion. And I looked at that problem and I was able to figure out within 5 minutes. I'm not saying I was genius. I just had interest in that particular protocol mm-hmm. that I've been doing a lot of work in. And that actually gave me very strong visibility into Cisco leadership. And then I got assigned to some of the largest financial institutions in the country. And I was working with a very big bank. Mm-hmm. And this is at that time that Cisco had the competitors like 3Com and those companies. Most of them are gone now. Yeah. So these guys had built a very large network, and the guy was very proud of it. I looked at that network, and I said, I think this is going to fail. And that guy got very offended with me. It's a big bank, and he said, this is what I hate about you Cisco guys. You're arrogant. And I said, I'm not arrogant. I've just worked with some of the large service providers, and I know the breaking point of this protocol, the way they're using it.
Yeah.
Well, in 2 months' time, it failed. Now, with the first meeting, the sales guy, who usually gets offended when the customer gets unhappy with you, was very upset with me. And I said, just let me write this paper that you just send it to the customer saying, this is what I think why this will fail. So he just sent it to the customer. He sent it to a couple of leadership. Obviously, they didn't receive it well when the paper went out. In 2 months, when that network failed, I got a call from their CIO, say, I want to see this guy. Mm-hmm. And after that, I worked on that network. I said, look, the networks will fail. Things will fail. But how do you avoid catastrophic failures? That is a very, very important factor when you build networks. The impact of a particular technology should not have a large blast radius.
Yes.
And that was always my theory, that you should be able to control the failure of this outage in a network. And that led me to the principles, how do you build the next generation networks? The outages should be very constrained. And a failure of a device should not have that large impact. And this is on the principle, that's how we're building Graphian.
Yeah.
Outages should be very, very small.
It's so interesting that's the angle that you're like that the build came from, because at the heart of it, it's resilience. And that's something that is at the top of the priority list for all of our clients. Every organization in the world, they are trying to ensure that they can maintain uptime, whether it's for the safety of nations or for their organization to keep being profitable. Do you have any kind of stories about those conversations at the board level where you really enter through the lens of resilience?
I always tell people, whenever you design a network, are you able to solve and isolate that problem with a half-sleep brain at 3 a.m. call? Mm-hmm. Everything you need is that 3 a.m. call. And now internet network is such a heart of any business you do. Yeah. So at every level, your security, privacy, scale, availability, resilience, convergence is so critical. And every time, always look, I always tell people, can I isolate a problem with a half-sleep brain? Mm-hmm. Then I have done my job.
Yeah.
And that obviously, if you look at what cloud guys have done, mm-hmm. they have looked at those principles and say, can I provide that resilience? A server failure in a hyperscaler does not impact your application. Mm-hmm. A big router failure in a network has an outage. We need to go on the same principles what cloud guys have done and hyperscalers have done. A single element should not have that larger impact. And from security perspective, availability perspective, convergence perspective, all these things have to be taken into principles. And again, like I said, I've worked with some of these bigger providers and financial institutions in my career. Mm-hmm. And I was always the guy who was on a plane to go try to fix and troubleshoot the problem.
Yeah.
So 3 a.m. call is always very important for me.
Yeah.
How do you avoid those 3 a.m. calls?
Yeah.
And have that resilience and availability?
That's so critical, and I really do love that the way that you look at things, it's so customer centric, and you're thinking about the practitioner. There's just a lot of elements that have to come together for something to be successful and for it to really transcend, a marketing trend. And that's really what you guys have done, which is very cool. Since I said marketing trend, though, I do have to take us in the direction of AI. So in the spirit of what you were describing as far as, the sleepy 3 a.m. brain, how do we make it easier for people to interact with the technology and make things more efficient, faster, and then effective? We talk a lot about AI for these use cases. With that becoming a dominant technology right now in the industry and a trend, how does Graphiant fit into that narrative?
So Graphiant will look at AI in two distinct business opportunities. Mm-hmm. One is from operational point of view. How my network has the resilience ability to reroute around failure, predict outages, do capacity planning to ensure my network operations run perfectly, mm-hmm. which from assurance perspective, I have that assurance that my network will survive those outages. Mm-hmm. Second thing that we look at it is if we look at what is happening to the larger internet. For the past 20 years, you look at all these major, which we used to call FANGs, like Facebook, mm-hmm. Apple, Google. These are right. content distribution networks. And they were built around ad revenues. So the content was serviced out of their data centers. You got mm-hmm. access to it, and they got the ad revenues out of it. Well, the internet is flipping. More data sources will be at the edges than in the cloud. The cloud will process more AI workload and run those deep learning algorithms. But the data sources are going to be inside of the enterprise. It's going to be inside of a self-driving car, real-time analytics, the video surveillance. So if you look at it, those real-time applications are actually at remote locations. From that perspective, the data sources are going to be so much larger at the edges than in the cloud. Cloud will process the data, and these input layers, if you look at all this artificial intelligence and deep learning happens with large amount of input data, and then you have multiple layers of the data processing, which is called the hidden layers, and then you get your output. So the hidden layers will definitely stay inside of the hyperscalers, or in my opinion, some of them will move into the middle mile of Equinix, Digital Realty. This is where more and more distributed data farms will be built. So there will be a hierarchy created. But the data source, which will actually execute those intelligent functions, will be at the edge. So it's going to become a closed loop system, which is about data exchange, and data exchange will flow from the edge to the middle mile, to the core of the hyperscaler, get more intelligence pushed back to the middle mile, and then back to the edge. So it's a closed loop system where the inference will be done either in the middle mile or at the edge, which requires less computing. And where it requires more computing, it's going to continue to run in the cloud. And this is if you look at the hyperscalers, they're looking at the same model because the next wave of the data is going to come from the enterprise. We will be exhausted with the commercially available data on the internet in the next 2 years. Trillions of data points. Great, we've built that intelligent system. But if I am a business who's trying to, in healthcare, manufacturing, I want that intelligence to be programmed and developed on my data. So I will have that domain-specific data, how that I need to be executed within my environment, although I can leverage the larger language models, but I will become that input point. And this is definitely the hyperscalers, the big guys see it. So that's why they're coming up with these custom domain LLM models for enterprise. And then the enterprise feeds that data. The control of the data should and will still remain with the enterprise. Because that is their asset. And they want that asset to be controlled by them, trained by the larger models, but asset controlled by the enterprise, and in a lot of cases by their business partners. That's the opportunity of the new ecosystem that we're heading towards for the larger build out. And internet will be that transport. And in its current form, internet is not ready for this type of environment.
This episode brought to you by Graphiant. Graphiant's Edge Network simplifies provisioning enterprise connectivity solutions with rock-solid security at a fraction of the cost of SD-WAN or MPLS.
It's so interesting to hear you talk about, looking ahead at what AI is going to look like for these organizations. I mean, what we're seeing at WWT is companies are actually biting off these projects right now. But one of the challenges they run into from just a pure business perspective, it's how do we allocate funds that previously lived in other parts of the organization towards these, modeling out these AI hypotheses, essentially. So how do you guys actually help on the business side in cost reduction to enable innovation?
At Graphiant, we looked at fundamentally what we need to change in networking architecture. Traditionally, the intelligence of all the decision making is in a classical hardware. So more information of how the data flow will happen, it remains in the hardware. The cost of hardware continues to grow. We took that all intelligence out from a device and clarified it. So from scale perspective, I was just talking to a major service provider and made this argument to them. They said, look, my device that I have in my router can support 4 million entries in my prefixes. I said, I'm supporting 10 million right now. And I said, if you came to me and said you want 20 million, I'll have them support it in the next 10 minutes. You want 50 million, I'll have them in 30 minutes. Because all that intelligence of how the networks need to scale is cloudified. And the cost structure is so much better. since every device doesn't require too much provisioning, every device doesn't require large data about the customer connectivity, from that perspective, the devices will never have to be programmed. So operation cost goes significantly lower.
Yes.
Hardware cost goes significantly lower. The scale continues to grow on demand. So the elasticity, obviously for the next generation network, elasticity is also as equally important.
Yes.
So I have that capacity that when I need it, I will use it. When I don't need it, I'll release it.
I love that. And I feel like when you have the elasticity, it actually does drive innovation, because when you're forced to buy your expected growth targets up front, you're going to end up with older technology in place. And by the time you actually need those, something else that's more efficient and better is going to be in the market, and you're not going to be able to take advantage of it. So it's a very cool concept and very, very useful for our customers.
Yeah, we looked at how cloud guys build it,
Yeah.
right? When we were running networks earlier in 90s, 2000, you had a complete server team which were maintaining all those servers. You had to buy the hardware, invest in that, and then run your applications. Cloud guys came along and said, you don't need to do all of that. We'll build it for you. You just consume it the way you want on as needed basis. We haven't done that in networking. Networking, everybody is building their own infrastructure and then connecting. We're bringing those principles into networking and the larger wide area networking, because wide area is going to be the most important aspect of it. What some of the people say, WAN is your next LAN.
Yeah.
And that growth of your wide area network, which connects anywhere to anywhere, and again, a lot of those connectivities would be ephemeral. If I am exchanging data with my partner and that data needs to go for AI training, once I'm done with exchanging that data, I don't want to continue that connectivity. I will just drop it and said, I got my data back and I'm going to use it. If I need to get the data back into the system, I'll bring that connectivity on an as needed basis.
Yep.
So we looked at how cloud guys did that. We applied all those principles. Cloud guys have this concept called serverless computing. We applied that serverless computing concept into networking. Our networking hardware, which we place in a lot of distributed location, in co-location, in the service provider backbone, carries zero customer profile. Zero. So from that perspective, when the customer connects or disconnects, it has no impact on the larger service. And also from availability perspective, a hardware dying in Graphiant has almost zero impact. As compared to a classical networking device, if a classical networking router dies, it takes on anywhere from sometimes 5 minutes to 25 minutes, depending on the number of scale customer you're carrying in that device. In our case, when I was talking to a customer and said, if any of Graphiant router dies along the path in the backbone, there is literally zero impact, because we hop on to the next available device, which will start consuming what this capacity this device requires. So exactly how cloud guys have built, we have orders of magnitude of scale we will be able to bring to the networking technologies. We haven't seen protocol innovations in networking in the past 30 years. It's about time we do something which applies the basic principles we've done, but make it more secure, more programmable, more elastic, just like cloud.
Oh, that's amazing. And I think I heard statistics that you guys, the cost reduction for WAN was something like 64% for some of your clients, which is so impactful to the entire organization. That just ripples out.
And interestingly, as your throughput increases, our savings increase rather
really?
than decrease. So as your capacity increases, you'll see a significant saving, anywhere from 60 to, in some certain cases, 80% for service providers, 80%.
Wow, that's amazing. So I know that you're very customer centric, and you think about what they're driving towards. Can you talk to us about some use cases where you've made your clients more competitive in their respective markets?
So one of our customers, who is also in content distribution, they deployed our technology. They were able to transition their network in days. And then based on their capacity growth, they decided, some of the locations at this point is not consuming as much bandwidth and it's more expensive. Let me move to another location. So they initially deployed some of the sites in Asia. The bandwidth cost in Asia for certain locations was higher. They moved it on time basis to North America. So in the days where another thing that I feel is going to become such a critical thing for everybody is power.
Yes.
And people would want to move their workloads based on the price of power, cost of power. So as the workloads move, and if I am in New York City, 9 a.m. in New York City means 6 a.m. in California. Can I process my workloads out of California and then move my workloads to New York after 6 p.m. in California? Then I move my workloads in New York. So all that capacity movement also is very, very critical. If I want to do it through traditional networking, even with automation and provisioning, I would not be able to get that agility.
It's so nimble. It's
So
an
nimble.
incredible solution.
So our customers are looking and it says, it's not just saving me the cost of running the network, operating the network, saving me the cost of giving me the agility. I can follow the sun model on power perspective as well. Power is becoming a very, very critical component in the days of AI. Wherever there is power, the big guys will come and says, I will take this power from you and I'll pay for you.
Yes.
And anybody who's not as significant in the next 3 years will say, I lost to these bigger guys who just came and paid top dollars to process AI workload.
Yes.
So the performance is critical, power is critical, and the perimeters of those AI workloads is critical. All these will more and more are essential for us to build the next generation network. We have to look at everything. It's not just sustainability from the perspective of I'm able to get you a better device to reduce the power.
Right.
We should look at it as how is the best way to utilize that power and capacity which is already there.
Yes.
As Graphiant, we looked at it. A typical service provider or a telco or a large enterprise has 500 locations, 600 locations. We looked at it and said that these 600 locations, even if a classic networking technology can reduce your power by 30%, right? But if we take this large information, which we call the state, out of these 500 locations, put it in 5 locations, so I have less power consumption. And on those 500 locations, we're able to reduce your power by about 80%.
That's incredible. And that's fundamentally, I think it's interesting because it's like we're very much going back to the basics because we're in such a place of innovation, but everyone is focused on that right now. And that's very, very cool that you guys have kind of put a pin in it and figured it out.
Yeah, it's very important that we look at every aspect of building the networks for data economy, not for content distribution.
Yeah. Oh, very, very cool. So we've talked a lot about the technology. We also want to learn a little bit about you and your background. When you're not redefining the networking space, what do you like to do outside of work, and what are some of your passions?
I'm an avid cricket player, not the cricket as an insect, but it's a game, which is played outside of United States. Actually, we had a game in U.S. recently. The World Cup was in United States.
Really?
Cricket World
So
Cup.
not pickleball?
Not pickleball.
It's not. So it's just not pickleball. Yeah.
not pickleball yet. But avid cricket and a soccer fan. And I keep on bugging Jim and Mike Taylor to get me tickets to come and watch St. Louis game. So big soccer fan.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. And you're up in the Bay Area?
I'm in the Bay Area.
Yeah, very beautiful. Wonderful. So before we kind of close out, are there some, because we've covered some really major concepts here, but are there some kind of larger strategic piece of advice that you can share, and then maybe a couple tactical things for our listeners that you can leave them with?
So Graphiant is solving a fundamental networking problem which have been addressed for the past 20, 25 years. Security of your data is very critical. One of the concepts we're working on, which we will be releasing very soon, is around data assurance. How the data traverses your network is very, very critical. I'll give you a very simple example. I was talking to a customer. There are countries that have a very strict regulations around encryption. And that encryption means you can't go above a certain amount of encryption parameters. So that means it's vulnerable from security perspective. If the path is built along those national boundaries, you can't have a much higher grade encryption. You have to lower down the encryption.
Yes.
And if we took a classic connectivity path, and the internet is based on the shortest path model, the shortest path at times is through countries which have very loose regulations around encryption. So Graphiant is coming and saying, Mr. Customer, you want to make sure that your data in transit is as well protected as it's protected inside of your environment. So the concept of data assurance is you just don't have the ability to see how the data is going, but the ability to program how data needs to flow through the network.
Wow.
And that is very, very critical. And again, people, I keep on telling my customers, you have to realize your biggest asset is your data. Anything you look at is how you need to protect that data in your infrastructure, in cloud infrastructure, in transit. And Graphiant's looking at data assurance concept that will give you the path visibility, not just the path visibility, but the control, which path it has to take, the application flow, and you will be able to see how the data enters back into your network as it traverses a wide area environment. So from security perspective, your entire intelligence of how you build your VPNs is in cloud. So you get that cloud level of security rather than device by device security. From programmability perspective, you decide if I do not want to take this data, GDPR data, can't leave national boundaries. So you will make sure that it doesn't leave your country because it's critical asset. More and more customers I'm talking to, in certain cases, we're talking to country leaders saying their data sovereignty is such an important factor for them. How do I protect my data that even if it's traversing the national boundaries, I want to control that.
Yeah.
So all I tell all of my customers, your biggest asset is your data. And that's our focus. We protect your data every step of the way as you build your next generation infrastructure in a cost-effective and very power-conscious way.
Are you going to have to add security into the name of your company?
People tell us we need to add that. Security, from our perspective, is naturally given.
Yeah.
But we have focused a lot on how to secure the next generation infrastructure because your workloads are going to continue to get so distributed. Wherever there is capacity, you will consume it. Your people are mobile, your workload is mobile, and that connectivity is anywhere to anywhere. And you need to be able to control that connectivity with the visibility and assurance.
Yeah.
That is very critical for us to build the networks of tomorrow.
Oh, that's wonderful, and it's so much in alignment with what we do at WWT because, as you know, we have ownership and visibility into so many projects for our customers where at first glance it may not look like it's a cyber project, but you have to just incorporate it into everything that you do as part of the build itself. And you guys have really done that, which is incredible.
Yeah, and WWT to us have been great partners. I mean, the type of insight we get from you guys, because you touch every customer. You understand their pain points. And we get a lot of insight that how we should be thinking about as we build our future. And companies like WWT are an asset to our industry. Whichever industry you're in, whether you're in networking, whether you're in applications, people need to be talking to partners like that. They will shape their products better. Because you guys live in trenches. You talk to the customer. You suffer their pain.
Yes.
And anybody who lives through the pain of their customers understand what needs to get fixed and what needs to get built. I, as a vendor, learned so much from WWT that you guys have helped us shape what you see coming in the industry and gives us a way to think that how we should be solving problems. And I think WWT should be a big influence for most tech vendors.
Oh, well, thank you for that. That's much appreciated and reciprocated because we view you as such an innovative partner that's really driving towards that next generation of networking, which is so exciting for us and for you guys as well. So just want to thank you so much for joining us on the show today. This was an absolutely fantastic and insightful interview. So Khalid, thank you for joining.
Thank you. Thank you.